I'm Brandi Kruse. Coming up today on Undivided, Washington State is on a political island nationally. Plus, it didn't take long for the governor-elect and the attorney general-elect of our state to show us what their priorities will be for the next 4 years. And adults should be ashamed of themselves for instilling dread in children about election results. That and more coming up today on Undivided. Remember, you can support our show for just $5 a month by signing up at undividedpod.com. Hello and welcome to Undivided. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much for your commitment to giving common sense a comeback. We've almost made it through election week. Almost. I'm exhausted. I don't know about you guys. It's a lot to take in. I think it finally hit me today just how bad the results in Washington State are. And actually, we are an outlier nationally. This data is fascinating. And of course, there's still some votes left to be counted in certain states. So maybe this changes. But as of right now, Washington State is the only state in the entire nation that didn't move further to the right. If you compare votes for Donald Trump in 2020 with votes for Donald Trump in 2024. Nicole, do you have this graphic? It's a fascinating, so I'm talking even California went 12% further to the right. 12 points further to the right for Donald Trump. New York, 11.6 percentage points further to the right. New Jersey, Maryland. And we're down the only state in the nation. We went 0.3% further to the left. Not overwhelming, but when you look at that shift nationally and the map, how it worked out with the popular vote is insane. I mean, you see just how tiny the little pockets in the country are. I mean, they represent obviously larger segments of the population, but even, down at the bottom with us, for instance, the one right above us is Oklahoma, which Oklahoma is solid red. So it's like, well, when you're that red, they literally didn't have one county that went for Harris. When you're that red, how much more red can you get? Washington State, the only state in the entire country that didn't shift further to the right. And I have to wonder why. I mean, I have my assumptions. I included it in our daily subscriber show poll today that went out just before we came live. And I threw some of those thoughts in there as options. And I'm curious to hear closer to the end of the show today what your guys' thoughts are on what would explain this. I really believe that media, and I'm not in every other state and every other city to see what their local media is like. I do know that ours seems at times to be hopelessly biased. I follow a lot of reporters in California and Portland for that matter. I don't think they're as biased as ours. I don't think they're as blatantly in the pocket of the Democratic Party. I see some great reporting out of San Francisco, some great reporting from mainstream outlets in LA. Great in terms of in comparison to ours, where they're calling their elected leaders out on homelessness. They're asking hard questions about crime and all of that. And here they're just not. There was this article that came out today from Cairo 7, and I just thought, where was this article 3 months ago when did they finally decide? 2 months ago when the ballot language came out on the initiatives, which what do we say right away? Horrible. The way the initiatives were worded was awful. Clearly meant to confuse voters, clearly meant to tip the scales in the favor of the no crowd. Here's what Cairo 7 comes out with today. Their headline: confusing verbiage may have influenced Washington voters on statewide initiatives, experts say. Well, no shit. Why are you putting that out the day after the election? If you knew it was confusing, you don't need an expert to tell you that. You read it for yourself, and the language was incredibly confusing. And so it's your job to make sure, not in a biased way, but to make sure that voters know what they're voting for. And voters know what the yes position is and the no position is. Instead, as the media, you just let them flail. And then the day after say, well, these all failed, or 3 of them. Must have been real confusing. It says a critical thing with referendums. This is from their expert, Christopher Adolph, a UW political science professor. A critical thing with referendums is how they're worded. Yeah, you don't say? He says, when people are uncertain about a referendum, research has suggested they often lead to voting no as a result. What the research showed us is that voters are much more in favor of carbon taxation when the benefits go to the environment. So these were all worded in a way that made clear, I think, to voters what the consequences were, which I don't think is true either. But we said that all along. When people are confused, they vote no. And what's interesting is that Donald Trump in our state got more votes than were yes votes on these initiatives. I don't know if it's for everyone, but for several of them. So you're telling me that there were people who voted for Donald Trump who then turned around and voted against these initiatives? That tells you they were confused. That tells you they thought they were voting for a different outcome. And I love this UW expert, right, who's clearly biased when he says, well, they were confusing, but the research showed that voters are much more in favor of carbon taxation when the benefits go to the environment. So these were all worded in a way that made that clear, I think, to voters what the consequences were. Yeah, but in a biased way. As we said before, with the initiative to repeal the Climate Commitment Act, it had that line like, voting yes on this will take away money from clean environmental stuff or all this. But it didn't have a line that said, but voting yes will also reduce the cost of gas through the carbon auctions. It didn't have the alternative, the ways it would benefit you by voting financially by voting yes. So it was incredibly biased. But the media, the day after the election, those ballot things were really confusing. You think? It's just insane. I don't know if it's like intentional bias, laziness, lack of reporters, lack of curiosity, an internalized belief that they are being fair. But unless the media turns things around, our state is going to continue to be this outlier nationally where everyone else is going to the right, seeing the failure of progressive politics and what it does. Even California, significantly so, California had the biggest shift to the right of any state in the nation. So you can't say it's like, it's just we're a blue state. We're a very blue state, progressive state. Well, yeah, but look at California. They are also arguably more blue than us, and they still shifted further to the right. And they ousted in LA County. They're really soft on crime DA. Every county in the entire state passed a proposition there to crack down on shoplifting and drug abuse. Every county in the state of California. And then here we are sending a socialist out of Seattle to Olympia to make laws for everyone else. I mean, we've really lost our mind. Not only are we an outlier, we double, triple down on the failed policies that got us in the position that we are in right now. So again, go take the daily subscriber show poll on Patreon, Locals, and X if you haven't already. And I want to read some of your thoughts at the end of the show because part of me is baffled. I know it's my job to analyze these things, but such an outlier, I'm a little at a loss for words. I know the media has something to do with it, and I don't think it's just one thing. California, for instance, also didn't have a gubernatorial race, that might have driven more, if it was an open seat, more Democratic voters traditionally, et cetera. So I know it's a combination of things, but it's just insane to see us so far off where the rest of the country went. So I do want to tick through a couple of the results as they stand right now. I'll just revisit the governor's race. I mean, we don't have to keep doing this, I guess, because we know that Bob Ferguson will be the next governor. But again, you just look at that separation by double digits. Dave Reichert, 44%. Bob Ferguson, 56%. It's just really mind-boggling. And I'll get to more on Bob Ferguson in a moment. So the only initiative that appears poised to pass is Initiative 2066, which will prevent future efforts to ban natural gas for your home or your business. That's great. So it's 4 for 7 on initiatives. And actually, in the latest ballot drops, the difference between yes and no has widened. So it isn't getting closer. So that's good. And I think that trajectory will continue. So I assume that holds, although, as we'll discuss momentarily, Governor Inslee and his cronies and allies are already scheming with ways to undo the will of voters. We anticipated that. State Supreme Court, which was our last remaining sort of holdout, maybe sanity will win the day. Dave Larson is now down, but it's still very close, way too close to call. He's got 49.67%, Sal Mungia 49.83%. So we'll see where the ballot drops go with that today. And then another close race we're watching, 4th Congressional District, R on R race. Dan Newhouse still ahead. to keep his seat, but way too narrow of a margin, 50.56%. Jared Sessler, 47.77%. So those are some of the races that, and also I will say that there's some state Senate races when it comes to the balance of power in the state Senate that are too close to call. The 10th on Whidbey Island, man, Ron Mouzol was like, there was a ballot drop yesterday, the Republican, he really needs to keep that seat. He was like up 500, and then another county dropped results, and then he was down, I think right now he's down like 67 votes. Oh my God. And then the write-ins, of course, there's like 70 write-in votes. Like, people with the write-ins, for the love of God, you don't think they're significant until you have a race that's separated by a few dozen votes, and then you understand how silly it is to do a write-in when there are real things at stake, like a supermajority in the state Senate. I swear to God, if Ron Mouzol loses by more votes or left fewer votes than there are write-ins, I'm going to lose my mind. I don't even know. I'm going to find write-in voters and go to their door and yell at them. No, I won't do that. But all right. So I mentioned a couple of these results. And of course, Democrats can't deal with any dissent. They, in this state, cannot deal with any disappointment. It was interesting because, like, at the election night party for Democrats in downtown Seattle, I was watching the news coverage and the mood was like grim. You won everything, but then they lost the presidency. So people were like, oh, yeah, my life is over. And it's like, you won literally everything in this state. But they can't deal with any sort of, they have so much power here and it's so consolidated and they're so used to it that any disappointment, any dissent, any losses is like, we're going to lose our ever-loving minds. And that goes for the initiatives. They're only going to lose on one. Of the 4 that went to voters, 3 of them resounding defeats. You'd think Democrats would be like, all right, that's a win for us. We're able to spend our way and lie our way into getting people to vote no on these. But no, Governor Inslee came out and he said what we all expected, which is they'll throw a temper tantrum and they'll sue over this.
There is concern about that initiative. It's very important to preserve the initiative process, to respect the initiative process.
Oh, give me a break.
And questions have been raised whether this was a defective initiative. It really was not fair to voters because it did not adequately describe what it really was. And I think there is a very good chance that the court will find that it was defective by violating the single subject rule and therefore will not be actually go into effect. But we'll see.
Are you kidding me? That's how power hungry they are. The state writes these ballot things. The state approves them. And we've had this conversation before, which the state should determine the constitutionality of a ballot measure before it goes on the ballot for voters to weigh in on. But they don't do that intentionally because they know the only people running initiatives are conservatives. And so they'll be like, well, I don't know, we might have constitutional questions about it, but let's send it to voters anyway, have everyone get excited, weigh in on it, and then we'll do a legal challenge on the back end when we don't get our way. That is the power we've given to Democrats. And nobody seems to care or understand how that is such an abuse of power. It's insane. And it's, they could win on everything else. It's like, give us our freaking natural gas. Just let us have it. No, not Governor Inslee. And then he starts and has the audacity to say, oh, we have to respect the initiative process. Give me a break. Your party did zero to respect the initiative process. Harassing signature gatherers, sanctioned by the state Democratic Party, lawfare to try to disenfranchise 1.6 million of your constituents. You did everything you could to undermine the initiative process. The Speaker of the House said it saddened her. It's the first thing Democrats are going to try to get rid of if they get a supermajority. Give me a break, Governor Inslee. I cannot wait till that man is gone. Although, I think the new boss is going to be far worse than the old boss. One of the things Governor Inslee said when he was talking about election results is he referred to his replacement, Bob Ferguson, and the man who will replace Bob Ferguson, Nick Brown, and said, he's thinking that they're going to pick up the mantle where he left off and going after Donald Trump.
We know that there are likely to be challenges from the White House, as we experienced of the first rodeo with Donald Trump. And I'm very confident that we have the best duo to defend Washington State that we could possibly have, which is Bob Ferguson as governor, Nick Brown as attorney general.
Yeah, and I said on the show yesterday that these two love that Donald Trump won. Like, they'll try to scare the hell out of people over Donald Trump, but they love it Because what they get to do is use Donald Trump as a distraction, use Donald Trump as a way to instill fear in people and distract from the other, the campaign promises they made and the other real difficult issues in Washington state that have gotten so bad under Democratic control that they're not going to be able to fix them in their terms, even if they were to try, which I don't think they will try. And so they're like, well, now we get to fearmonger over Donald Trump. You don't believe me? Well, they're having a press conference today about it. Bob Ferguson and Nick Brown, Attorney General-elect Nick Brown, having a press conference today specifically about how they're gearing up. It says, AG Ferguson offers briefing on Washington's preparations for a second Trump administration. Media are invited to attend a press conference or participate in a conference call in which Attorney General Bob Ferguson will provide a briefing on Washington's preparations for a second Trump administration. He'll be joined by Attorney General-elect Nick Brown. Is there any question what they're going to focus on for the next 4 years? We are 2 days out of the election. They've just become, results aren't even certified. Everything else they promised, the moderacy they promised, we're going to hire more police, fix things, address crime, all of this. Let's focus on Donald Trump. This isn't a surprise. It's what they're going to do for 4 years. And anytime anybody has a whisper of, but what about homelessness? What about crime? What about the promise you made about hiring more police officers? What about overtaxation and the increased cost of living? And they're going to say, wait, what about Trump? Trump, be very scared. We're going after Trump. I wonder if Nick Brown can sue Donald Trump more times than Bob Ferguson did. And I asked Nick Brown about this when he came on our show. We did a long interview about it. And I knew that this was going to be the case because I asked him, do you think these constant lawsuits that Bob Ferguson filed against Donald Trump were a distraction from the issues of Washington state? And he said no. And we played the ad yesterday. One of the first or last political ads Nick Brown aired in the campaign was about, we all feel the fear of the fact Donald Trump could be the next president, but I'm ready to take him on. Is that really what you want? I'm sure there are some of you who it is what you want. That we're going to, as a state, spend the next 4 years fighting the White House and ignoring the issues that continue to get worse. And you might say, well, they can do both. They haven't. Bob Ferguson hasn't done both. He hasn't made any of the issues better in Washington state. He spent 4 full years with an obsession over Donald Trump. And bringing lawsuits that had a minute tie to Washington. And in lawsuits that maybe didn't have any tie to Washington, they'd write briefs in support of them. Doubled the size of his office. No wonder they doubled the size of his office. They were spending so much time finding ways to obsess over Donald Trump. They needed extra attorneys to do so, while they were also busy prosecuting police officers unsuccessfully for murder. So Bob Ferguson isn't going to do anything that he promised. He's not. He might give this, we have all these other, Donald Trump did this, it's a distraction, and so we got to deal with it. It's really insane, and it's not just Washington state. California, Gavin Newsom tweeted out, California is ready to fight. I just called an emergency special session to help bolster our legal resources and protect our state against any unlawful actions by the incoming Trump administration. Fear-mongering before there's anything to fear-monger over. Whether it be our fundamental civil rights, reproductive freedom, or climate action, we refuse to turn back the clock and allow our values and laws to be attacked. Gavin Newsom, your state, more than any other in the nation, went further to the right, 12 percentage points. Maybe that's a cue that people in your state want you to focus on the things that you've ruined as opposed to obsess over the former president. New York, same thing. All the issues happening in New York. Letitia James, of all people, comes out with this dramatic press conference. Dramatic, we're going to stand up to Donald Trump. Again, this was yesterday, a day after the election. Here's a clip.
So here we are.
Oh, God.
We've studied their platforms.
Oh, God.
We've identified certain possibilities, fact patterns. We've created contingency plans. So no matter what the next administration throws at us, we're ready. We're ready to respond to their attacks. We're ready to respond to any attempts to cut or eliminate any funding to the great state of New York, as the governor outlined. So despite what has happened on the national stage, we will continue to stand tall in the face of injustice, revenge, or retribution.
Wow, injustice.
We will continue to protect and our most vulnerable and marginalized amongst us. Because it is my sworn duty and responsibility to lead that fight, working with the governor of this great state, Kathy Hochul. This is not the time to be fearful, New York, but faithful and steadfast, knowing that I, as the Attorney General, along with my entire team, we are guardians of the law, and we are prepared, my friends, to fight back.
Can you get more dramatic than that? I mean, that is main character syndrome, if I have ever seen it. Talking about injustice and revenge, you mean like what you guys have been doing to Donald Trump? And I'd also say, similar to California, New York, of all the states, you were the second in the shift toward, your constituents shifted 11.6% further toward Donald Trump. You don't take that as a cue? Like, again, Washington's an outlier. Lord only knows what the hell people are thinking here. But California and New York were like, we don't want any more of that. Some of the bluest states in the union. Double-digit shift toward Donald Trump. But that doesn't compute for them. They think they're so righteous and they're out, we're ready. Like, ready for what? Like, what are you anticipating?
It sounds like they're ready for war.
Literally. And they want to act like he's the one, fear-mongering and putting people on edge. You're putting your constituents on edge. You are the ones making your constituents more fearful about what Donald Trump might bring, as opposed to saying, look, he's the president. We'll see what happens. If there's ever a conflict between the two of us, we'll deal with it when it comes. We got a lot of things going on in the state of New York, and we're going to focus on those things. No, can't do that. Can't do that. And coming up next, we're going to talk about this again, instilling fear in people where it doesn't need to exist. It's one thing for politicians to do it. That's sort of par for the course. But there is a disturbing trend of adults instilling dread and fear over election results into the minds of little kids. It is about the most horrifying narrative to come out of this election. We'll talk about it next. First, please join us at the Roanoke Conference at the end of January. This is the largest gathering of center-right, politically involved people in the state of Washington. It's out in Ocean Shores, January 24th to the 26th. One of my favorite events of the year. We love going out there and just sort of making a weekend out of it, out on the coast. Their keynote speaker this year is going to be Coleman Hughes, host of the podcast Conversations with Coleman, author of The End of Race Politics, an argument for a colorblind America. In addition to that, there's going to be good company, good conversation, informative panels on local and state politics. So especially after this election year, I imagine there's going to be a little bit of a come to Jesus about what do we do from here to try to save the state of ours. There are special discounts right now for students, active duty military, and law enforcement. Find out more at roanokeconference.org. That's roanokeconference.org. I don't know what is going on wrong in the mind of an adult who would try intentionally to make children fearful, scared, sad about the results of a presidential election. Let's talk about it in our segment, Unfreaking Believable. Boop. All right, so I got to start with this video. It's not from Washington State, but it's going to set up really perfectly this issue, and it's just disturbing. It was posted by like libs of TikTok or something. So it's a mom in her kitchen, and I don't understand the mindset. There's more and more of this, like the people losing it over Donald Trump, who they're so sad and angry, they take time to set up their phone and like take a video of themselves crying and like getting sad. I'm like, why? What is with this trend of taking videos of yourself having a mental health breakdown? Or taking videos of yourself crying and then posting them to social media. It's really weird. It's really weird. So anyway, this mom, presumably having a vulnerable moment with her kids in the kitchen and her husband, but take the time to set up my phone and record myself having this difficult conversation with my kids. So you can't see the kids, but you can tell from their voices. They're very, very young. And she's breaking the news to them that Kamala Harris lost the election. Watch.
Harris did not win.
You won.
Trump. So I'm
Take a breath.
Yep. So today may look a little different at school. Okay, there are probably going to be friends who have questions, right? I'm sure your teachers are going to, I think, we currently are in a country where we get to choose, right? And people have different priorities, they have different values. Some people hear what he has to say and they don't believe him, and some people hear what he has to say and they believe him and they agree with him. So today's your school day is probably going to look pretty normal. Okay, your teachers are going to do a really great job of, if you have questions throughout the day or if you have big feelings throughout the day.
Do you like these?
Are you sad?
I'm very sad.
And now you're crying.
Why would you do that to your kids? Why would you do that to your kids? Did you hear them hyperventilating when she told them that Trump won? And the dad says, take a breath. And then she's crying on camera. And are you very sad? Now you're crying. Why would you do that to your children? They don't know. They only know what you teach them at that age about politics and politicians, unless they go to one of Washington State's public schools, which we'll talk about next. That is a horrible thing to do to your child, to instill that kind of sadness and dread in them over adult issues. I don't like telling anyone how to parent their kids, but I can tell you I wouldn't parent my kids like that. And they're not just getting it at home. They're getting it at schools. We've been sent multiple examples of school districts at all schools at all levels absolutely encouraging teachers to be worried and obviously instill worry and fear in students, or giving students space to come to terms with the results of the election. This email actually went out the morning of the election, so before results became clear. It was from the North Shore Middle School principal. Good morning, North Shore. No doubt today is a day that many of us, including our students, have some feelings about, and most particularly anxiety. As I sit here to compose this message, I am managing my own anxiety. I struggled with what to put in the subject line, much less what the message should be, how it should be worded, how can I help provide some comfort. These are stressful times, and today and possibly in the coming days will be stressful as well. Please note that our students have fewer coping skills than we do. Doubtful, because you clearly don't have any coping skills, and they may be feeling their own stress and anxiety based on how the adults in their lives are feeling and their concerns about how the election outcomes might impact their lives and families. I know you will show up today, provide a consistent and predictable space for them, and model kindness and caring just like you do daily. They need this from each of us and every day, but some days they need it more than others. I hope you are able to find ways to manage your own worries, fears, concerns. Lean on each other and the loved ones in your life. When it comes down to it, we need to wrap around and buoy each other during turbulent times. I am sending you all my strength and support. When did adults get so emotionally weak? Like, grow a pair. I hate to use that, but grow a pair. I don't understand how we are so emotionally weak. That's before the results of the election were even in. That's 13 hours before ballots even dropped in Washington State. Talking about, these are turbulent times. We need to buoy each other emotionally. Learn coping skills. That you don't even have coping skills, clearly, and now you want teachers to help children cope, who might be at home getting dread instilled in them by their parents. This one, I don't even know really what to make of this one. We have reached out to the North Thurston School District because this is one we really felt like we needed comments on. Like, look, if you're a public employee, post what you want on your free time, but you don't think this is bleeding into the classroom, and what if a kid sees this? Jeff Peltier is a Timberline High School employee. The website says he's a media director, coach, and football play-by-play caller. Here's what he posted. I think I have to swear, right? Yeah, I'm just going to swear.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to read it as he wrote it. So if there's kids in your car, I'm reading it as he wrote it. Been fighting the fight since 1981. I am white, cis, and always been pushing for better for everyone, no matter of race, creed, religion, or gender. My school, the school I attended and have worked at for 32 years, is home to people of all walks of life. It's hurting. Not just those on the margins, but all of us. If you voted for or cheered on Trump and those that supported him, I simply say, fuck you. Your short-sighted, misogynistic, racist, and fascist asses can just fuck off. I'm despondent now, but you unholy mother effers better understand that I am not defeated, and neither are a bunch of us who are sick and tired of your stupid, backward, bullshit behavior that drags everyone down. Your day of reckoning is coming, and it will not be good. That is a public school employee who's a coach, football play-by-play caller, media director, vilifying the families of a good chunk of kids in the North Thurston School District, telling them they can F off, they're misogynistic, they're racist, they're fascist, they're backward, and their day of reckoning is coming, and it will not be good. I don't know about you, but that sounds like a threat. What does that mean? Your day of reckoning is coming, and it will not be good. Completely inappropriate, a fireable offense. They won't fire him, of course, because North Thurston, Olympia, all those school districts, they're probably like, we're proud of him. You know? Oh, he's so brave. Let's see. And it doesn't just stop at K through 12. A Central Washington University professor, honest to God, sent this memo to students. Headline, Mental Health Day. Hey, everyone. I've got a feeling that everyone might need some space today, so I'm going to roll with that. I will be in the classroom today for anyone who just wants to talk, process, vent, cry, whatever you need. You are more valuable than whatever I was planning on teaching. I am extending the deadlines on all of this week's work. The due dates will stay the same, but the assignments will remain open until Sunday night. Please take time to take care of yourselves. Make sure to eat. Drink water. Move your body. Also, the English department main office has a therapy cat and guest kittens for college students. A professor who is extending deadlines on assignments, essentially canceling class for the day to give his students a mental health day, feels the need to remind them to eat food and drink water, and says if you are so emotionally disturbed, there are therapy cats and kittens. Have we lost our mind? That's Central Washington University. That's Ellensburg. That's mental. This is adults. And then again, if you're a college student, you're just fine because you're more mature than the people who teach you. You might get that email and be like, "Geez, should I be concerned? I don't feel concerned. Should I be having a mental health crisis?" So this is what we're doing to kids, right? And it's not just grade school. It's not just college kids. Oh no, we need adults to be fearful too. King County, Dow Constantine sent out a note to all King County employees. Headline, a place that welcomes, includes, respects, and values. Dear fellow King County employees, with the result of yesterday's presidential election clear, many of us are feeling anxious about the future of our democracy, our nation, and our world. Not really. I'm feeling anxious about the future of King County and Seattle, though, and I have been for quite a long time. If you feel more anxious about Donald Trump than you do about the fact that people are dying on our streets in King County at record numbers, and we have more homeless people than ever before, and crime is through the roof, and the murder rate has doubled since 2012, if you're more anxious about Donald Trump than any of those things, I can't help you with that. I'm going to keep trying. But you do realize that's crazy. So then he goes on to say, blah, blah, blah. At times like this, it may seem that our differences can never be bridged, and all this. And like, oh, I know this is a stressful time for many, but remember, there are always people you can reach out to for emotional support. This is a message to adults in a workplace. Essentially telegraphing to them that they might need emotional support over the results of a presidential election. Wasn't just Dow Constantine, King County Metro. This one really gets me. Remember what connects us at Metro. And it's the same sort of narrative. I want to take a moment to reflect on the recent election and express my gratitude to partners at King County Elections for their hard work and dedication. Then it gets into, for King County Metro employees, if you're feeling the weight of the moment, please know you are not alone. These county resources are available to support you. It talks about making life easier. Offers free confidential support for emotional and overall well-being. The Employee Assistance Program offers free counseling and coaching around work-related stress and concerns. As a King County employee, you also have access to comprehensive health care, including mental health services. Oh, and then they bring up the employee resource groups, which are known as affinity groups. You can focus on coming together based on a shared identity. Yeah, so the groups that segregate people based on race, I love how they're talking about how divided we seem and how we're not that divided. And then they talk about, well, if you're feeling off, you can go into one of your affinity groups where you're just in a safe space with people who have the same skin pigmentation as you. But what really got me about that one, I don't think King County Metro bus drivers are rattled by Donald Trump. They're dealing with violent crimes on the buses on a daily basis. They're dealing with people smoking and shooting up fentanyl on the buses, stabbing people on the buses, shooting people at the bus stops, breathing in meth and fentanyl smoke on the buses. I think they're going to be able to deal with and cope with the stress of Donald Trump just fine. What they need help with, mental help with, is probably the environment that you have created and put them in to work in every single day. We, as a country, if this is how emotionally weak we have become, had Kamala Harris won, I would have been upset, but I wouldn't have needed mental health support. You realize that this is downfall of nation stuff. If this is how weak we've become as adults, and if this is what we're putting on our kids. They want to act like, oh, we're so concerned about the mental health of kids, and we have a mental health crisis among kids. You think? Why do you think that is? Go back to the video of that mom. Why do you think it is we have a mental health crisis among kids? They have no coping skills. You have taught them that routine events in the country are enough for you to cry. They should hyperventilate. They should take the day off school. They should go in a room and play with kittens. They should go seek mental health, counseling, and therapy. And we wonder why there's a mental health crisis, not only among youth, but among young adults. Wild stuff. It's shameful. Truly, truly shameful. Get a grip. Not you guys. You have a grip. You have a grip. But people around us are melting down. Absolutely melting down, as you'll find out in our closing sanity check today. All right, if you're thinking about leaving the state, as so many of you said on election day, now I don't think that's a mental health reaction. I think that's a reaction where it's hey, the state isn't serving me anymore. The taxes are too high. It's just not in line with my politics. I'm ready to leave anyway. I'm going to go to, Arizona. Retired Seattle police officer Mike Boggs decided, retired from SPD, I'm going to sell my home, move to Arizona. So he reached out to our friend Wes Jones at sellwithwes.com. He was so happy with the results.
So the concerns were, is it presentable enough to sell quickly to get the price we want? Wes came out and met with us, and we told him what our concerns were. And he mentioned the concierge service, and we did take advantage of it. It was such an easy process. Wes is a really great guy, and his team is amazing, and the communication is great. So the whole process was great.
Yeah, and he's now in Arizona, kind of jealous. I'm sure there'll be some Washington State people joining you soon. Sellwithwes.com, sellwithwes.com, a better way to sell your home. All right, let's take a little break from the craziness in Washington, shall we? Because we do a weekly segment called Florida Report. We check in on what's happening in the Sunshine State. Florida, no longer the battleground state it once was, solidly red. So let's take a little reprieve from what's going on here and check in with my sister.
It's not even controversial anymore. People know in Florida their freedoms are going to be respected.
Miranda, hello from hello to Deep Red, Florida.
Yeah, and hello from Deep Red, Florida.
Yeah, hello from stupid Washington. We're the only state in the entire country that didn't move further to the right. The only state.
It's funny because when I was watching your election coverage and your episode yesterday, in my head, the song was like, I'm blue, da ba dee da. That's all I could think of. I'm like, why is this in my head? I'm like, this is like your state anthem
That
now.
is our state anthem. That song was a banger, though. I'm not gonna lie. I like that song. I'm blue, ba bee da da. A blue little house and a blue Corvette. And anyway, Florida moved plus 9.7% to the right. If you look at Donald Trump's results in 2020 compared to 2024, it's interesting how states, they do change. I mean, Florida used to be the battleground state that mattered. Now it's like, nope, red.
Yeah. In addition to that, we also were one of the first ones to fully report our votes. We went from the hanging Chad state to getting our homework done early.
Yeah. Any sense that Puerto Ricans didn't come out for Trump?
No, I mean, it's not for here. It's not even the Puerto Ricans, it's the Cubans, and they love Donald Trump down here. They really do. And they came out and partied in the streets, banging on pots and pans and had a good time.
Good. Love to hear it. So we have covered on the show in this segment a few of the props that were on the ballot. 1, 3, and 4. Is that it? 1, 3, and 4?
1, 3, and 4 were the big ones that we talked about. Yeah.
All right. So they all failed, including weed. Florida Indians aren't ready to legalize weed?
No. And honestly, they all got pretty close to passing. I mean, they needed a 60% vote in favor to pass on these. And they did all get over 50%. So majority vote happened, but it had to get to 60% to make it happen on all of these initiatives. And they didn't get there.
Interesting. That's a high threshold. That's not the way it is here. It's a simple majority on our initiatives. So the other one, of course, was would have been a dramatic change in abortion access in Florida. That also failed.
That also failed. And that one, I think they barely got over 50% vote for that one. I think that when it comes to that kind of a topic, they were overreaching. I think government's really bad at finding some sort of middle ground. If you get offered a job, you try to negotiate your wages and you wind up somewhere in the middle. And I just think that they're not very good at doing that. So, maybe they'll have another conversation.
Yeah, it was really, really strict abortion laws to nothing. And it's you should have known maybe somewhere in the middle would have been a better way or a better place to sit. And then the final one that we really, I think, both struggled with how we felt about it would have made school board races partisan.
Yeah, correct. As I was watching that one come in, I was like, oh, wow, that's going to pass. And then it kind of the number just kind of evened out. And that one didn't go through. And I'm kind of glad that didn't. I think it's already pretty obvious when school board elections come up, people are endorsing them and posting them. So I think you can already put, if you do your research, which we should all be doing when we're voting, you can probably figure out where somebody stands. But it's such an unnecessary thing for school board, in my opinion. So.
Yeah, I agree. I want to move away from labels as opposed to adding more labels to things. That just seems like a silly idea. So I'm okay with those results out of Florida. The weed one, it's weed here, everybody thought it was gonna be this transformational, we're gonna make money hand over fist, and everybody's always like, where's that money going? Where's the weed money going? And it's I'm fine with it here, but I do think weed has some intended consequences, but for youth that are getting addicted to it, it's really problematic. So when you sort of sign off on it as being this legal thing, I think youth feel well, what's the big deal? So that's something I think we need to contend with.
I think so too.
Marco Rubio, what do you think the chances are that he leaves his Senate seat to join the Trump administration?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like their relationship has been kind of up and down throughout the last decade or so. I don't really know what he's going to end up doing. I mean, I guess we'll see.
He's been campaigning pretty hard for Trump, and I mean, he's been on the stage with him and stuff. And I tend to think he'll take something if Trump offers it. I tend to think he'll go, and then, because then you'd have the governor in place to be able to appoint a replacement for him. So it wouldn't be they'd lose that seat. So we'll have to see what Marco does. Yeah. All right, Miranda, thank you for the update from Florida. Enjoy your bastion of freedom while we sit here in government overreach land.
You guys can always come and visit and see what it's like if you want.
I might not leave, though. I might not leave. Okay, we'll talk to you next week.
Bye.
It's not even controversial anymore. People know in Florida their freedoms are going to be respected.
It's not even controversial anymore. I'm kind of surprised about the weed thing. I don't know. I guess not. Depends on what kind of ads we're airing for and against it. People weren't too keen on making weed legal across the country. Maybe that's why we have a mental health crisis. People are all sad, smoking weed and stuff. All right, I've encouraged you guys to take the First Mark challenge. It really is a no-brainer. I mean, I don't even know how else to pitch it on the show, because it's like, instead of dealing with your own insurance, you could have a wonderful insurance broker doing this for a long time in our market, go over all your current insurance, talk to them about your insurance needs. That's all the First Mark challenge entails. They take a few days, maybe a week. They're out shopping the market for you, seeing what they can do, and they'll come back and they'll make their recommendations. They might say, hey, the insurance you have is the best insurance that you can get, and we can't do any better for you. And they'll just send you on your way, and you'll have the knowledge that you did a good job by yourself. Or like Michelle, she says that, she'd been hearing us talk about First Mark on the show for a long time, and she'd mentioned it to her husband. He wasn't ready to look into it, and then they got their renewal statement for their existing provider. For the next 6 months, it was going to go from $3,000 to $8,000. So then they're like, now we're ready. So they took the First Mark challenge. She says, we worked with Brad. He saved us more than 50%. We can now continue our discussions about getting a travel trailer. Love to hear stories of successes on First Mark challenge victories. So don't wait. Take the First Mark challenge today. firstmarkinsurance.com, firstmarkinsurance.com. The very best part is they work for you. Okay, I want to get to our daily subscriber show poll, because I'm sure, like a lot of you, I feel baffled, really. It's so hard. I think we're living in this really connected world. So we see everything happening in the state. We don't see it getting better. We don't see people voting differently. And then you look at California and people are voting differently there. Are things really worse in California? Have they really hit rock bottom in a way that we haven't yet? God, if that's the case, I really hate to see what rock bottom looks like. So I asked you guys in our daily subscriber show poll on Patreon, Locals, and X. I said Washington's the only state in the union that didn't shift further to the right in Tuesday's election. What do you believe is the biggest factor? And I gave you a few options. Stronger anti-Trump animus, local bias, local media bias, weak Republican options, conservatives moving away, or other. On Patreon, 50% of you are saying local media bias. The rest of you are kind of spread out amongst the other options. Kelly says, I really, really don't think people understood what they were voting for when it came to the initiatives. I think my former self, before listening to your show, thank you, would have struggled to understand what my yes or no vote meant. But now what? Sand says, I helped my elderly mom vote, and the cable TV ads had her completely swayed to the Democrat side, even though she's been a Republican her whole life. I had to sit with her quite a while to discuss the issues and help her vote. How many didn't have anyone to talk to them and work through those awful ads? Joel Locke says, I own a locksmith business in the South End. I believe it's a population shift of conservatives moving out of state and leaving the state of California's and those leaving the state of California moving into the area. I have rekeyed many people's homes that have moved from California. They bring their politics with them. Eljo says, great question. I genuinely think they all apply to some degree, but the media bias here is unrelenting and extreme. I can envision the state legislature in some form or another passing a tax to subsidize local newspapers. Well, I think they haven't passed a tax yet, but there are like tax breaks. Bob Ferguson was the one who was pushing those. Gee, I wonder why the media was so in favor of Bob Ferguson. Could it be that their bosses were like, hey, he's giving us tax breaks, got to support him? Let's see over on Locals. Winton, liberals from all over the country, because Washington has become a progressive liberal safe haven for them, so maybe they're moving in. Chris says, I'm so disappointed with how disjointed the Washington State Republican Party has been. It's completely ineffective. I said yesterday, I think it's dead in its current form. DOJ Mike, when the media knowingly backs an incumbent that they themselves have said is doing a poor job and also endorse a candidate that openly lies unchecked, they are the majority of the problem. Couple that with the rest of the options you've offered us, and there's the problem. Yeah, you have to look at like what's different than California. Like what's happening that's different here than New York or California. They're experiencing some of the same problems, obsession with Donald Trump, ignoring crime, ignoring homelessness, ignoring substance abuse, ignoring the border issue and how it impacts our state. So they go hard, double digits further for Donald Trump, and we go in the other direction. So it's going to take some thoughtful analysis and looking at the voting pockets and all of that. But for instance, let me actually, really quick, it's going to take me a second, but it's important because I just want to point something out. Give me one second. 1 seconds. So in the federal race, I got to go to the Secretary of State's website really quick. So Washington State had, you might know this, the only remaining bellwether county in the entire nation. So Clallam County out on the coast, I think since the 1980s, the only, and after there was like 8 bellwether counties remaining for the 2020 election, where they choose the winner of the presidential election. So it makes them, in terms of like, they're always in line with it. They'll go red, they'll go blue. They always vote for the winner of the presidential election. It had been that way for like 40 years or whatever it is. And in 2020, all the other bellwether counties were knocked out. Clallam County, Washington was the only remaining bellwether county. So I looked yesterday, and I want to make sure that's the case. They did not successfully predict the outcome of the presidential election this year. So the last remaining bellwether county is out. In fact, Clallam County went 53% for Kamala Harris. So the first time in decades that county has not accurately reflected the winner of the presidential election. So maybe not a surprise since our state moved further to the left, but it shows you like how disconnected a county that had been for years, so many elections, a bellwether for what was happening nationally. Now it's gone. And inaccurate by a lot. It's not like it was like, 51% and 49%. It was 53% for Kamala Harris, 44% for Donald Trump, who obviously ended up winning. So I just think that's interesting. So Washington State, apparently in Clallam County, not the finger on the pulse of what's going on anymore. All right, good questions in the Daily Show poll as usual. I just knew Zach Abraham would be all fired up today. So Zach Abraham with Bulwark Capital, obviously, keenly aware of what's happening with the economy and how the presidential election might impact that. We talk to him every week, and of course, we're talking today about the outcome of the election, not only nationally, but also the election results locally. Donald Trump, that is a decisive victory. So from an economic perspective, I have to imagine that you're excited about it.
Yeah, and I think everybody should be. Meaning, I think that whether you like Trump or not, all of his policies are going to be pro-growth. They're going to be pro-wage growth. It's more sensible. And I think one of the things you saw last night is, and I hope this is what you saw last night, was that people are realizing that the ulterior plans are not sensible. It kind of felt like the curtain that these people have been hiding behind for so long, it got pushed aside last night. And I think voters saw things over the last 4 years that they're not going to unsee. Yeah. And so I do. I think that it's going to be pro-growth. I do think the one caveat will be that I don't think it's very likely he's going to be able to generate that higher rate of growth without another tick up in inflation. I don't think it's necessarily going to go as high as it was. I don't think you're going to get back to 8-9%. But what the hope is going to be is that wage growth can outpace inflation. And when you look at the problems that we face here that have been, 4, 5, 6 decades in the making, that is really the only feasible way out of this, right? Mm-hmm. Like you have to have above trend inflation for a period of time to try to inflate your way out of this. So yeah. I don't.
And that's kind of a question I had, because, and this is true for anybody who runs for president or really any office, where they're like, we're going to do this, we bet on the economy. And then they get elected and they're kind of like, okay, but also, and then they start giving caveats like, so just let your expectations, keep them low for the first little while. So I'm wondering if Trump has overpromised on the economy.
I got to go back to his first election. I mean, one of the biggest surprises to me, the way he governed was, in my lifetime, I had never seen a president pursue as many of his campaign promises as earnestly as he did. Quite honestly, there was a lot of things that he talked about or promised in the first election cycle that I was like, yeah, it'd be cool if he did it, but I doubt he will. And then he did. So I don't know. I feel like you got to kind of take him at face value. I think that I mean, what did he show us? That first election, he gave a good try to virtually every election promise he made. Which again, you may not like him, but I mean, just regardless of what party you're in, we've never had a president do that.
So, it's a mandate for the president across the country, except for Washington, where we've utterly lost our minds. So it looks at maybe strengthen Democratic majorities, sending Bob Ferguson to the governor's office, virtually no wins for the Republican Party or gains anywhere in terms of congressional seats, etc. A couple like on the fence, but these are people who, the capital gains tax is going to remain in place. Long-term care tax is going to remain in place. The Climate Commitment Act is going to remain in place, which increase costs for families. They might have a majority to be able to push their rent control pretty easily. So a lot of regulation, a lot of taxation. What does it do to our economy?
I think, there's been decades of just horrible policy in the state. I think that the geography of the state, the beauty of it, and I think the location of some really big corporations has overridden that, right? It's kind of like the old COD, cologne over dirt, right? Like it's been cologne that made it smell good. I don't know if that dynamic is still in play though, because I haven't looked at this recently, but I want to say we're still on that trend of we've got more people moving out of the state than moving in, correct?
Last I heard, yeah.
Yeah. So that's an issue. And more importantly, the states that aren't insane, like our neighbors, Idaho and things like that, in conjunction with not being insane and then also Trump policies, I think those places are going to become even economically more attractive. And I would expect it to speed up the people pulling out. And honestly, I'm at a point at this state where it's sort of like California, where you're like, the only thing and I hope I'm wrong, but I just don't see any evidence of it. The only thing that's going to turn this around is just pure disaster. Like these policies have to blow up because these people clearly, I mean, the fact that, 55% of this state thought Bob Ferguson was a superior pick.
Yeah.
What that means pure and simple is there's two types of people that voted for him. There are people that are hardcore authoritarian fascistic liberals, right? Or they're underinformed voters.
Yep.
Those are the two groups, right? And I think the underinformed voter is a much bigger percentage of that pie than the hardcore.
100%.
What gets people to be informed? When the pain of their existence requires them to change and learn. And until that happens, I don't have a lot of hope. I mean, this state is just out to lunch.
Yeah, I got to agree with you. It has to be that they don't see the disaster because they're really living in their own sort of bubble, which I envy. But once you wake up to it, similar to what you said about the nationally, people have seen things they can't unsee. I think you and I find it so hard to imagine how people have not seen it here. Like, what does rock bottom look like? How is this not rock bottom? But I don't know. Maybe businesses start to leave, more businesses or something like that. But
and you and I both know the stories. We probably sit here for 5 hours too. It's also this authoritarian vindictiveness. I know multiple friends of mine who run businesses that are still getting raked over the coals by the state because they didn't enforce mask mandates, even though mask mandates were proven completely ineffective. How vindictive can you get? Yeah. And these people are out of control. You don't have the right as an elected official to be vindictive against select citizens. You, my friend, are in violation of the law, and you're violating your citizens' constitutional rights. And that is a nonpartisan issue, right? And that's what frustrates me so much, that if these people actually had this experience, if they felt the smoke from the policies they support, they wouldn't support them. Amen. Right? And they're just sacrificing their neighbors and fellow citizens on the altar of political expediency and their own ignorance. And it just makes me want to rip my hair out.
We like that. I love Zach. I love angry Zach. It's my favorite. Zach is having one of his Know Your Risk live webinars to talk about the outcome of the election, how it might impact your retirement portfolio. It's coming up on November 21st, 3:30 p.m. Totally free. You can attend and just listen passively. You can ask questions if you want. But you can sign up, knowyourriskradio.com, knowyourriskradio.com. And that's really what they're going to be focused on. The outcome of the election, what risks are out there to your retirement portfolio. That's their number one focus at Bulwark Capital. You only get one retirement. So whether you're going to spend it here, Arizona, Florida, whatever it is, I hope you spend it here because this is where I'm going to retire and I don't want to be alone. But anyway, it's really informative and maybe can help you leave feeling a little less anxious. So knowyourriskradio.com, knowyourriskradio.com. Okay, questions and comments. I have to say, there was a comment in there that I want to start with because it was... it's breaking my heart. Nicole, do you have all the fan funding ones in? Samantha Olson. This is so sad, Samantha. I saw a bunch of people saying, I'm sorry, Samantha, in the live stream comments. And so I was like, what happened? Samantha Olson, $25 super chat. My uncle took his life after the election Tuesday night. We think it was due to the election. The work you're doing is so very important. We have to get the truth out. We have to break this mind virus. It's literally killing people. Holy smokes. That is so sad. I am so sorry to hear that. No matter why somebody takes their life, that's awful. But God forbid, people are so, and we just talked about it, like they have let themselves be so consumed by national politics that it's hurting their mental health. You know, the fact that there are people going around every day who are carrying the weight of the political system in that way makes me so sad. So Samantha, again, my heart is just breaking for you. I'm so sorry to hear that. Our best to your family. Awful. Summer CS 499 Super Chat. Brandi, I didn't listen to your show yesterday because I didn't want to see how disappointed you were. You worked so hard. If you decide to move, Texas is great. I'm not going to move. I appreciate you saying that we worked hard. We did. I'm very tired today. I would say, I tried not to act like depressed and disappointed. Obviously, I'm disappointed, but the world keeps spinning and we're going to keep fighting. And one thing I do want to hear from you guys is, what do you think needs to happen? What do you think? Is it a movement toward independent candidates? How should we continue to use our platform to try to wake people up? So I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on that, especially those of you who got involved with us politically this past election cycle. We're not going anywhere. Again, I'm planning on retiring here. We're not picking up stakes. We don't do a national political podcast. There's a reason for that. Like we focus on what we know best and where we think we can make the biggest difference. And it's the state that we call home. And we're going to continue to do that. Baron of Gray Matter, $10 super chat. Brandi, the alliance of ultra-rich NGOs and the people they serve have taken advantage of an electorate that is too stoned and distracted to pay attention. U.S. will thrive while this state sinks. I also do believe one of the issues here is there is so much progressive money being dumped into these elections from the unions and from very wealthy people on the left. I mean, look at Bill Gates, who dumped money in to defeat the initiatives, Nick Hanauer, the Ballmers. So you have this very wealthy progressive contingent that I don't think exists to that extent in other states. I mean, we're a very rich state. I wish some of those rich people would use their money for good. It drives me nuts sometimes that, not sometimes, all the time, that you have corporations in this state who want to be seen as sort of altruistic and, they don't want to offend the progressives or the far left because they have to live in this state, but they do so to their own detriment. Like Amazon. Jeff Bezos named the arena Climate Pledge Arena. You really think Jeff Bezos cared to name it climate? No, he's like, I want to appease these people who hate us so much. You didn't appease them. You're never going to appease them. So just do what's right for the business. Adorable, deplorable, $5 for the swear bucket. Don't worry. Chris Reich dumbass will fix Timberline. Look, I didn't swear. I was reading swear words from an unhinged public school employee. And I felt like in order for it to really hit how unhinged his post was, I didn't know there was 3 F words though. So I said the 2 and then I abbreviated the 3rd.
Yeah, when it's MFer, like it just feels really
feels
yucky.
Different. MFer. Come on, dude, get a grip.
Oh,
and we're supposed to believe that you're going to be a good influence on the next generation. You can't even contain yourself. Very curious what the school district has to say about that post. Mama Pillow, too many people want to treat children as small adults. Let them be kids. 100%. That's what Nicole was saying before the show. Just let them be kids. Let them worry about kid stuff like being bullied. Like, whatever happened to just being worried about being bullied?
Right. Or just tell them that, like, it's not going to affect their lives.
This is an adult issue.
Like, this is why you vote. Teach them to vote.
Yeah.
Say, oh, we didn't get what we wanted. Not enough people voted for us. Like, this is why it's important that you vote. Things like that. I mean, I talked to some older, like 18, 19-year-olds that could have voted and they didn't. And they said it doesn't matter. And I'm like, do you realize only, what is it, like half the state, not even half the state is voting?
Yeah.
If we had more people voting, things would change here. But they all feel disassociated because we're like, we're blue, there's no hope for us.
Yeah.
Oh, there's hope. There's half a state of hope. But we just don't do anything to reach those people. I think that's really where we are right now, is that people are so disengaged, so they feel less hope. I think they feel trapped and they feel and they just disengage completely.
100%.
And I mean, we're teaching our kids that that's what you do, is just cry about it.
Yeah. Crafty Grandma Crispy says it started with participation trophies.
Yep. Absolutely.
Jethro McButterpants, when you raise emotionally weak children, they grow into emotionally weak adults. Shrug. And I really believe that. I always go back to this, people, everybody wants to be the victim, right? And it used to be you didn't talk about your problems, you didn't talk about your weaknesses. And I don't think that was necessarily healthy either. Like, you bottle stuff up and you just persist. Sometimes, hey, look, if you see I've seen a therapist before. I'm not saying that there's something wrong with like taking care of your mental health. What I am saying is it's wrong to give little children dread about a presidential election and adult issues because you can't control your mental health. Like, I want to be clear, like, take care of your mental health. If you're really bummed out by the results of the election, touch some grass, take a walk, put your phone down, all of those things. But the idea that it would overcome you to the point where, like that educator, you'd be going on these hate-filled rants, wishing doom on people who voted against Kamala Harris is just insane. But I always use this quote from Arnold Schwarzenegger. It was in Barbara Walters' book Audition, which I read when I was in college, studying journalism.
To it on Audible.
Yeah, and she,
hours.
talks about some of her memorable interviews. And Arnold Schwarzenegger grew up in abject poverty, and one of the things he said is that, when you are raised in comfort and all of this, that doesn't create a strong person. It doesn't turn you into a strong person who has the will to be the best in the world. And he really felt like his upbringing and the challenges he faced and how he had to confront those challenges and how his family made him confront those challenges, turned him into not only a physically strong person, but a mentally strong person who had the will to compete. And, I had challenges when I was a kid. Everybody's had challenges when you're a kid. And it has to do with how your parents make you confront those challenges versus sort of sheltering you. They're not going to be able to shelter you forever. And so 100%.
And
Jethro.
Just to add a little bit, it can also be somebody else. Like, just you need a role model. Like, be a good role model to these kids. So if you're seeing this, like, just remind them. Yeah. It doesn't have to be your kid. I mean, don't go, parenting other people's children. But I mean, I'm sure there are there's a lot of kids in my life that I talk to on a regular basis. And I tell them to vote, tell them why it's important, but it's not the end of the world if it doesn't go your way.
And you don't have to hide that. I'm not saying, and this is part of the confronting, make sure kids confront difficult situations. Like, again, I'm not telling you to parent your kids, but like, hey, there's a lot of people who are upset about the results of the election. I don't like them, but this is what happens. Every 4 years we elect a president. Half the country is mad, half the country isn't, and then you move on. Yep. And there'll be another election in 4 years, and you can read about it, learn about it and all that stuff. But like, project this feeling of stability. Yep. Even if you're personally feeling like mentally taxed, just be honest with your kids about it. It's just wild. Don't turn your camera around and film yourself crying and your kids hyperventilating. Weirdos. Most Sterling, it's mostly the younger teachers that exhibit the more emotional behaviors. Yeah, probably. Christopher Gerton, we have to be more involved. Our numbers are great. We just need to show up. Yeah, your numbers weren't great. Numbers weren't great. But yeah, I mean, your numbers aren't great if they're not showing up. Those don't count as your numbers. If they're not showing up, they're not counted among Republican numbers. So they only count if they show up. Nightwolf, the core of the rot in our nation resides in academia. I agree. Robin Hofstad. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I don't know if I've said this on the show, but that's how these other countries like want to like take us apart from the inside. Like you get to schools, you get to education, and you break it down there, and then we grow into this like lost society, which is happening. I mean, Russia, China, that's what they want to do. They know to go after the education system.
Right. They're not in
that's where you get them, and then they grow into weak people.
They're not in Russia and China saying, let's put tampons in the boys' bathroom. They're just not, okay?
No.
Oh, my God. In Russia, they're probably like, we're not even going to put tampons in the girls' bathroom. And if they have an accident, we're going to throw them out to the bears and see if they survive. You know, they're building them hard in Russia. Robin Hofstad, I agree with Zach. We have to hit rock bottom. I don't know what that looks like. Baron of Gray Matter, I hope they come and buy my house so I can move. The Californians reopen mental institutions, rename them safe spaces. The Reaper's Son, we need to bring back the turn off the lights when you leave billboards for Washington State. There was one of those in Portland, right? That was like kind of, or was it in Washington? Oh, it was during the Boeing. There was some sort of thing when Boeing left and they last person to leave, turn off the lights.
Turn off the lights.
Sergeant Pickles, 199 super chat. Call it what it is. Woke Jim Crow. And then says Trump, JD, Tulsi, RFK, and Vivek really is the dream team. We still need to hold them accountable, though. I'm excited about seeing what RFK will do to our health system. 100%.
Absolutely.
He was talking about why do we
fluoride.
have that, and then he was talking about why in other countries do cereals like Cinnamon Toast Crunch have 5 ingredients and we've got 37 ingredients. And then there was a liberal commentator who retweeted that video and said, this is not the guy we need in charge of our health. I'm like, that sounds like exactly
the person in need of
we need in charge of our health
It's a really big thing that we kind of brush aside here, what we put into, what we consume, and all these kids and adults that have gluten intolerances. That's not a thing in other countries. They don't do what they do to food here.
Yep.
And I do think that's something that could be really interesting if he gets a grip on, because I mean, the red dyes, blue dyes that they don't allow in other countries, but we're like, give it to our kids, put it in our cereal,
color our food, whatever. The brighter the better.
I'll be big.
Yeah. Good comments per the usual. I wanted to make sure I didn't miss any super chats. I don't think so. So with that, speaking of people letting their emotions get the best of them, let's get to our closing sanity check. 82 years old, and cannot tolerate people disagreeing with her politically. There is a story out of Washington State. 82-year-old Edmonds woman sees what I would note are 2 women of color in Trump gear, flying Trump flags. This happened Monday, so day before the election, although I saw in a Fox 13 report that the Edmonds Police Department said they didn't let the public know about it till after the election because they didn't want to sow discord. And I'm like, and I'll get to more of that in a second. But so basically, it's an 82-year-old white Edmonds woman. She's arrested for a hate crime after she saw these 2 Trump supporters and assaulted them. Here's Como News with one of the victims.
Just shocked that just the presence of me, and she made it very clear it was my skin color.
Gina was with her friend Mary Jennings doing this, supporting Donald Trump, waving flags and signs, when she said the woman confronted her over her political beliefs and race.
And then that's when she shoved me, pushed me back, and I said, don't touch me. And then not even a second, she just popped me right in my chin.
Insane. So Como also got the police video of the woman who was arrested. So far, she hasn't been charged, but arrested for a hate crime.
I approached her and I said, I want to know why you're voting for Trump. That's the only reason I wanted to know. That's the only thing. And I said, because you're brown skin. Was to push her away, and I put my hand to her chin.
So she admitted to it and brought up skin color. So yeah, that's a hate crime. Here's the thing that gets me. So first of all, 82 years old. You've been through so much in 82 years of life, and you are still so triggered because of the skin. Oh my gosh. It's typical white progressive ladies in Washington State. It's like, oh, your skin is brown? How could you support Donald Trump? Like, I'm going to make your... Here's the thing that bothers me, though. I saw that Fox 13... Well, that bothers me, but this Fox 13 segment where she was saying that Edmonds police said we didn't report to the public because we didn't want to, make things worse or the environment worse. You really think that if it had been a white Trump supporter who assaulted 2 brown women waving Kamala Harris signs, that wouldn't have been on the news before the election?
It's interesting to me because I actually know the Edmonds chief, and I don't think she's super liberal.
Well,
she was in commercials for Riker.
But I'm not. Maybe it wasn't her decision.
Right. I know. I'm just saying it's surprising to me that it ended up like that.
Right.
But I guess you're just trying to not influence it, and maybe it wouldn't have mattered, but then maybe the liberal person that was attacked would have cried louder and made sure it hit the news before.
Yeah, I have a hard time believing. And I'm not saying it's the police department's fault or that they were like made a bad judgment call.
Done it anyway, but I think it's these ladies were, they were pretty emotionally distraught about it.
Yeah.
And so they were kind of, they didn't seem like they were screaming about it. They were hanging out in their house and like, okay, we'll talk to the news. It seemed like to me. So I would say it's because the person who got attacked would have been like, wow, look what they did to me, which would.
Just insane. It would have been on the news before Election Day. 100% white Trump supporter assaulting two brown people holding Kamala Harris flags. Interesting. But speaking of media bias, that has been our sanity check for today. Thank you so much to those of you who've been with us all election week. We appreciate you. To those of you who followed our election coverage, if you have enjoyed it, supported it, we would love for you to support the show. It's $5 a month to subscribe. undividedpod.com, undividedpod.com, and you get access to our exclusive show for subscribers, Sundays with Subscribers, aptly named because it's on Sundays and it's for subscribers. And our guest this week is someone who maybe more than anyone might face the retribution of Bob Ferguson once he takes office as governor, and that is independent journalist Glenn Morgan, who pulled off the Three Bobs scheme ahead of the primary. So we look forward to hearing from Glenn on Sunday's show. Again, undividedpod.com, undividedpod.com. So subscribers will see you Sunday. The rest of you will see you Monday at noon.